Good afternoon, you guys. I'm really excited to be speaking with you about user-centered design and business model design. IDE stands for International Development Enterprises. We were founded in 1982 by Paul Pollack, who first started his foray into market development in Somalia, where he helped people make donkey carts so people could better transport and sell their wares. We jokingly call it Ass Haul Limited. Today, though, we are in 11 countries with nearly 1,000 staff, the vast majority, 95% of whom are based in the field. So we really pride ourselves on having boots on the ground local knowledge. And through the power of markets, we have improved the lives of 23 million people in wash, agriculture, and access to finance across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Our end goal is really to maximize the power of entrepreneurship for good. And to give you an example of how we have used user-centered design for business model design, I'll be talking about our efforts to develop sanitation markets in Cambodia. A little bit of context, Cambodia is a country of about 15 million people, with the vast majority living in rural areas as smallholder farmers. When we first started, just over 20% of the rural population had access to sanitation. So the bottom line was that there was a lot of crap in the fields. So to address this problem, IDE used user-centered design to design a product and business model and trained up a national network of sales agents and latrine business owners. In this model, sales agents were tethered to specific masons that we call latrine business owners. However, problems arise when supply and demand are mismatched. Some sales agents are superstars. Some producers may be busy with other work. Either way, not enough supply to meet demand. Backlog leads to delays, delays lead to anger, and anger leads to cancellations and ultimately very unhappy users. So how do we go about solving this problem? It all started with a how might we question that our WASH director, Michel Duguay, had. He asked, how might we balance the load so that businesses who have ready supply are rewarded with orders and customers are served more effectively? The solution, we called it load balancing. We route orders from multiple sales teams to a supply coordinator who has the experience and data to decide which producers to assign the orders to. The catch, people are spread really far apart, and it's impossible to scale the model with paper and spreadsheets. So to solve this problem, we used an app called TerraWorks as our Swiss Army knife. We have an information systems architect in the headquarters team who designs custom processes and pushes it into Android devices. Field staff can view, create, and edit Salesforce records in a guided manner, even when offline until they have a connection to sync again. There's no off-the-shelf solution that is even close. So armed with TerraWorks, agents log every order, including photographs and GPS coordinates, and sync them to Salesforce. Supply coordinators then assign batches of orders to the best producer available based on current backlog and historical performance. The supply coordinator then confirms by phone or in person that the producer can indeed fulfill the order. And just like Amazon, some customers even get next-day delivery. Producers log orders fulfilled in a record book. Then the supply coordinator closes them out at the next visit. Each step gets a timestamp. It is easy to report on anything. We know where each order came from, when it happened, its status. We know that we are reaching the poorest citizens, what percentage of the population, and how long it takes to do so. We can monitor the supply chain down from the provincial level to the coordinators to the latrine business owners. A high level of transparency and control helps us win the confidence of partners, board members, donors. However, the sophisticated system was not developed without challenges. We encountered a ton of challenges. And we started developing the system using low-res prototyping. You know, like we mapped out the process using pen and paper before we moved to digital. We started with a small group of users to work through all the bugs before scaling to this national network. And we found anomalies that we didn't understand. So we would have orders showing up before, we would have deliveries showing up before orders happened, and we wondered why was this. And it was because when the producer would deliver to the customer's neighbor wanted a toilet, and so he delivered another toilet. And then later on, the sales agent would enter the order. So we would not have found that out had we not gone back to the field to check. And so some of the other challenges we encountered that you could probably find parallels in your work, we had lots of spotty data connections. There was unreliable office power. Field officers can't charge their phones at home. Devices lack local fonts. Android version too low. It's not an Android device at all. Or it is more effective as an incendiary grenade. So I'm sure you can find parallel challenges in the types of design solutions you have tried to accomplish. But we also came up with some tips for project managers alike and developers. So from these challenges, we learned some very valuable lessons. First of all, processes should be defined as much as possible. Think about the exceptions and how should they be reported. What if someone cancels at this stage? What happens if your staff leave? And talk about the future vision, like design for expandability. We were able to do a new pilot looking at targeted subsidies on the same platform just by adding a dozen fields because we thought down the line of how might we use the system. So as you can see, it was a lot of challenges and iterations that enabled us to refine the system to be what it is today. And while this system has helped solve our initial problem of load balancing, it's generated some unexpected value too. Because we track every step of the process and so much information is generated, the wealth of data is enabling us to apply rigorous evidence to the UCD process. So a lot of times we think of ethnographic methodologies being used for user-centered design, but what we're gathering from this MIS system is a ton of quantitative rigorous data that can feed into the UCD process. So all in all, we used user-centered design to solve the original problem of load balancing, but the products of the system, the real-time data, is allowing our team to make much more rigorous decisions faster, so iterating faster, but with better data, thus applying UCD much more effectively. Powered by the ethos of constant iteration and always going back to the user, we've now recorded over 250,000 sales in Cambodia over the last 7 years. To conclude, I'm going to talk about 5 big lessons learned. I think this is quite clear coming from the discussion this morning, but user-centered design is not just for product design. A product can certainly be transformative, but it often requires a wrapping around service experience that makes it desirable, accessible, functional. A seamless service experience without the supporting backend, however, would not be operationally feasible. So it's the combination of product, seamless service experience, and robust operations that creates a strong business model. Second, start from a place of possibility and define the right problem. It's important to ask generative questions like how might we unblock the supply chain, and stay open to possibilities. So initially we had started to ask the question, how might we unblock the supply chain? And we did actually an entire deep dive looking at the supply chain. But that was the wrong question. It was actually, how do you facilitate a more efficient supply and demand interaction that led to the load balancing system? So one example that I like to give that everyone can relate to is like, it's not how do you design a better chair, but how do you elevate the body in a comfortable way? And maybe your solution is a sofa. So ask how might we and make sure you're solving the right problem. Next, use your entire toolbox. User-centered design is best practice when bringing together a multidisciplinary team. Using only engineering or only ethnographic methods or only quantitative analysis is not sufficient. It is through a combination of all of these that you achieve accurate, timely, rich, meaningful data that you can actionize. So use different methods to gather and synthesize this data. Ada alluded to this morning, but you cannot innovate overnight. It takes time to talk to people. It takes time to get to people, as many of us know, sitting in the back of bumpy trucks, riding to the village for 4 hours. It takes time to listen, to process, to brainstorm, to ideate, to test and evaluate. Innovation obviously doesn't stop after the R&D period, but you must constantly test and iterate while you implement. So get comfortable with the paradox of failing early and often and learning very quickly, but trusting that the entire innovation process takes a long time. And finally, make user-centered design the culture. A toolkit alone is not enough if it is not applied. People will only apply it if they live the values of listening, of prototyping, of iterating. And if you make UCD the ethos, the culture, then your team will apply it to everything they do, whether it is product design or business model design, organizational design. And for us, culture really means this is how we do things here. So whatever the problem they're trying to solve, if they use a user-centered design ethos, they will say, this is just how we do things here. And with that, I leave you with a Japanese phrase, genji genbutsu, which means go to where the work happens and see what is happening. So go out and learn, adapt, iterate. You need to check the system often. It will break. People will work around it, and you will be confused. But if you constantly go back to the field, to the user, you will find a solution and continue innovating. Thank you.